set to Affleck height. Welcome all. I'm Stuart Affleck, and we're here today to celebrate my sister, Janice Lynn Affleck. And it's our hope that you will feel Janice here today, in this place and in this moment. There will be tears, but there can also be joy, and we're going to share memories of a very special person who touched all our lives. Wife, mother, daughter, sister, aunt, friend, and colleague. Let us begin with a few words from Janice's sister, Elaine Dreytrace, and her daughter, Shannon, with some words and also a selected scripture reading.
My sister Janice had a motto: be brave. She never did get it tattooed on her wrist, but she did think about that. And she was brave. She was strong from the start to the end of her life. Underneath her hard shell was a heart full of love and caring. We went through all kinds of things together, and she always encouraged and understood me. She did not go in for a lot of foolishness, but she was a lot of fun. She was kind and generous, and her life reminds me of these verses from 1 Corinthians.
Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, hopes all things, endures all things.
Hi everyone. This is a nice place. It's been a while since I've been here. As a family, spent many Sundays. Stuart and I were Boy Scouts in the basement. And I think Stuart, you spent most of grade 7 in the basement after the wing of the school burned down. Is that correct? And Janice would have spent a lot of time in this place too. Hi everyone, welcome here today. I'm Ross Affleck. I'm Janice's oldest brother. My joke is I'm the big fair one. He's the little dark one. And in a couple of years, we're both going to be gray. So my first order of business here is to read the obituary. It is with great sorrow that the family of Janice Affleck announces her passing on May 27th, 2021, surrounded by her husband and children. She will be remembered for her strength and resilience, especially over the past few years. She will be deeply missed by her husband of 22 years, Don, children Aaron, Kemper, Davis, Karen, Cameron. Sorry, Cameron. Parents Jim and Olga, siblings Carolyn, Gord, Ross, Carol, who's not here today, Stu and Don, Elaine and Roland, and Graham and Michelle, along with numerous beloved nieces, nephews, and many other family members and friends. In memory of Janice, the family requests that any charitable donations be made to the Breast Cancer Society of Canada or the CIBC Run for the Cure. So Stu says I'm the right person to do the next part of the ceremony today. He says I'm the storyteller of our family. Apparently I can remember dates and events more than anybody else can. And if nobody else remembers them, they must be true. So what I put together today is it's remembrances of probably Janice's earlier time in her life when I was around more and we had more family overlap. Certainly as we got older, our families went their different directions and we don't have as much for stories in common towards the end, but my dad and Graham will cover some of that in their speeches. So to get going here, Janice was born January 5th, 1965 in Rosetown. I remember going to see Elaine as a baby in the window of the old hospital about 3 floors up. That was our baby sister, but we had to wait for Janice to come home at our house. And at that time we lived in what was called the Wheat Pool Cottage in Stranraer. There was 2 bedrooms and there was 5 of us. It was crowded, and Mom can attest to the fact that we did not have a lot of services. I say we were about 2 steps up from being pioneers. In 1966, Saskatchewan upgraded the house, and Stu and I got our own room, but the 3 sisters shared a room once Janice got out of the crib. So there was 2 things that I remember too, was when another child arrived, we usually got a different car. It was usually bigger. Elaine remembers the time in Stranraer when it was a big deal to get a dime and go to the general store a block down the street. She also remembered a time when she hoisted Janice on her shoulders. Janice was probably 3 or 4. Elaine, you'd have been 6, 7. And they crashed. While it may have been a mutual decision to do this, Elaine got a heck and Janice got a broken collarbone. Another family story is we were playing tag at Muggs. That was the golf course on the edge of town. And someone, I think Stu, opened a car door just in time for Janice to run into it. So it was off to Dodds Land to get stitches. And if Janice wasn't worked up enough, when the doctor put the hood over her to identify where he was going to stitch, she went wild. And it took all of Mom's strength to hold her down. She said when they were done, they were both just a sweating mess. And just picking up Mom and Dad here for a second, they had a very active social life in Stranraer, a busy little community, and Carolyn began to mind us as a family. So Carolyn, that was the beginning of looking after the rest of us, which you still do. Our family moved to Davidson in 1969 when Janice was 4. She was home with Mom, the rest of us were in school, and there was no grandhead. Mom recalls letting Janice out the door to play in the neighborhood you could do that back then. She would come home when she was hungry, cold, or hurt. One time she did come home crying. One of the Schmolly kids from down the street had tackled her and stomped on her head. So mom consoled her, patched her up, and set her back out. In 1970, the Boyle family moved next door, and I remember Janice and Jason Boyle becoming really good friends. Lorna and Bud Boyle, our neighbors, only had boys, so the three Affleck girls were pretty special. Also, Elaine recalled it being a really big deal when Janice got to go to kindergarten. That was a first for the Affleck family, to go to kindergarten at Mrs. Ellamy's just around the corner here. In April 1973, we moved to Humboldt. Janice was in grade 2, but just before we got to Humboldt, we first moved to the town of Burr, which is a few kilometers south of Humboldt, while our new house was being built. And although it was only for 2 months at the end of that school year, Janice and Elaine have lots of stories to tell about going to that school for 2 months. It was a step back in time and a change in culture. Our dog Max at the time could go to school, and one of the highlights was one day he turns out to be the uncle of my son-in-law. I didn't know that at the time. He was in grade 6, and he drove, was it a car or a truck? He drove to school. Half-time, he could drive a half-time to school. He was in grade 6. By October, we were living in the new house, and Janice in grade 3 in Humboldt by then. And she was in brownies and figure skating and piano lessons at Mrs. Patton. Yes. Yep. Family moved to Weyburn in 1976. I didn't make the move. I'd left home by then. Janice started grade 6 there. She and Graham were in the same school. Elaine was in junior high by that time. What I remember about Weyburn was we weren't there very long, but taking you young ones to Nickel Lake. We'd go to Nickel Lake whenever I showed up. Then on November 21st, 1977, which happens to be my birthday, how old was I? 20. The family moved to Regina, and Janice was in grade 7 by that time. And the good news was there was no more family moves. Janice spent time working at Woolco during high school. She chose to go to Robert Usher High School, which was a new school, so she could make the basketball team. That's what Dad said. If she'd gone to one of the higher schools, she might not have made the team, but she made the Usher Unicorns. She learned to drive, and I remember the yellow Maverick. Remember that car, Graham? That's when you learned on too, but the yellow Maverick. Nice car, yeah. Janice graduated high school in 1983. So her adult life, I'll move to that. She moved to Saskatoon and lived with Elaine, working for minimum wage at a toy store. I think that motivated her to go back to school and get an education. She was home in the fall of '84, I think more Woolco, and then she worked for a Dr. Varner for a period of time. Wanda, I think that's about the time she started spending some time in Shell Lake. I'm not sure what all you guys did, but I think you got in a lot of trouble up there, too. Probably chasing boys. Then in 1986, she enrolled at SciAst in Moose Jaw in business administration. She played basketball while she was there. She took an extra semester, in fact, a second major, so she could play basketball longer. I think she roomed with you, Graham. She commuted for a while, you guys roomed for a little while there. Then in the summer of '89, she was off to Calgary, living with Elaine and Roland again. She shared a room with Lise, and Elaine said, Lise would wake up in the morning, I don't know how old you were, Lise, and she would say, look at Janice and say something, and Janice would say, call your mom. She was working for Canada Trust at that time as a collection agent. Not a great job, but she did that. She was applying for better jobs, and Elaine said she could remember one time she went for a job interview at Sunshine Village, the ski resort, and Elaine drove her out, and Lise, you and Elaine, you were in a baby carriage, and Elaine turned you around Sunshine Village while Janice had the interview. In 1990, she moved to Edmonton to start work for Canada Revenue. She met Don Turnmeyer about that time through friends. But Don, you moved to Saskatoon. Yeah. So long distance relationships developed. And what I remember about that period of time, you're already driving Hondas. You started Hondas back then.
Yep.
Janice did transfer to Saskatoon in '92. Cohabitated with Don. They bought the house in '93. Aaron, '94. Married in '97. Davis in '99.
98 you married.
98. I'm glad you got that right. Governor General Award in 2012, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Raising kids, what I remember, kids' activities, whether it was sports, dance, and Mexico. I don't know how many times you went to Mexico, but Mexico was a big thing back then for you guys. And what I remember about Janice too is if you went to a sporting event when Janice was in the building, you didn't have to look hard. You could hear her. She was very loyal to those she was cheering for. Norway in 2019, very memorable trip for the sisters. Great trip. And Janice retired from CRA in 2020. So that's my story. A few years ago, about 15 years ago, my daughter Elena is here. Where are you, Elena? There you are. We grew up in Stranraer, and I went back to work. One of the first places I worked was Plenty, which was the next town. And in 2013, we went back for a weekend, and we were staying with friends who, it turns out, Helene married the son of those friends, but we didn't know that at that time. We were 5 years ahead of that. But I remember driving away from their dad and saying, a piece of me never left the hills of Stranraer, because I loved that place so much. When we left Davidson in '73, we kind of left Carolyn behind, not quite. Carolyn came back here. But Janice always said she liked Davidson, and Davidson was her happy place. That was a place where we all were as a family of Afflecks. We were all here at one time. And I think that's one of the reasons we're here today, is because Davidson was that good to Janice. So I would just close by saying, a piece of all of us will be in Davidson forever now. Thank you. Next is Janine Johnson, niece of Janice, daughter of Carolyn and Gordon, going to speak.
Hello, family and friends. I am Janice's oldest niece, Janine. Janice had just turned 10 years old before I was born. And from then on, she was an auntie whether she was ready to be one or not. As Uncle Stu said, all of you today know Janice in different ways. Daughter, sister, cousin, niece, auntie, great auntie, friend, wife, and mom. And we all had different names for her, most of the time good names, and her for us. And she was very good at nicknames and somehow just seemed to stick. But she was Auntie Jan to me, and I loved her dearly. I will promise that when Aaron asked me to do this tribute, I was extremely touched and honored. But part of me didn't want to do it, because I knew I'd have to sit down and actually face the fact she is gone. And not just on holiday, or I haven't seen her for a while, and I just can't call her up and chat, or ask her for advice, or see how her day was. But I imagine many of you have been feeling that way the last few weeks, so I know I'm not alone. However, I pulled myself together, like Auntie Jan would want me to. I realized that this is one of the best ways to honor her. And for that, I am proud to stand here today. There are many ways to describe Auntie Jan, but the very first one that came to my mind was fierce. And how she knew how to get shit done, and how she worked hard at her career, and how much she loved her kids and husband, and how competitive she was, and how she was as a fan of sporting events, as we've heard, and how she worked through having cancer, and of course, how she would say what she thought and was always unapologetically herself. There are so many stories about how, even as a little girl, she knew her own mind and wasn't about to take crap from anyone. I love that about her and can only hope that she rubbed some of that fierceness off on me. In the last couple of weeks, I chatted with my brothers and my first cousins to get stories and feelings about Auntie Jen, because she isn't just my Auntie Jen. And it was awesome to see how much we all felt the same way about her and who she was. This made me think that I would like to share some of these messages throughout. We all thought Auntie Jan was pretty cool. I remember her in high school with her feather baby's haircuts, high-waisted jeans, and her blue eyeshadow that I coveted. Just take a peek at her grad picture. Cousin Carmen felt the same way, and she sent me this touching message. I will always remember Auntie Jan as being cool Auntie Jan. Since I was small, I always admired her, not only for her great basketball skills, her short hair, her cool apartments, character homes, just to list a few. She always was a strong, independent, career-driven lady, and such a fantastic female role model. No matter how cruel Auntie Jan was, we also all agreed that she was always there for her family. I have great memories of playing board games in Grandma and Grandpa's basement, her sneaking us pop from the bar fridge, and walks to the park as little kids. Being the young auntie that she was, she spent a lot of time with all of her nieces and nephews. Cousin Helena sent me a note about how she remembered Auntie Jan before she had kids, and how she and Dawn took them to Aladdin and bought them the biggest pops they had ever seen, and how they would watch high-tech movies at Jan and Dawn's place on the movie projector. Cousin Carmen remembers one of her first trips as a 4-year-old going to Auntie Carolyn's farm with just Auntie Jan, and how that was her first time away from home. Cousin Shannon shared how she loved her one-on-one sushi lunches with Auntie Jan when she would come to visit them and her mom was at work, and how happy it made her mom when she visited. Cousin Lise told me how she loved visiting Auntie Jan when she was growing up and going to their apartment in Edmonton with Cat Tilly, and the many hours with Jan and her mom in the dreaded Sears Bargain Center. Auntie Jan loved a good deal. The New Village and the Bay Sales Rack were some of her treasure troves. As Cousin Carmen noted, to this day I commend her ability to stretch $1. That she could. Cousin Peter noted that he always wanted to be on Auntie Jan's team for charades, as she seemed to be the undefeated champion, and that he loved how she would beat his dad. Not that anyone is competitive in the Affleck family. We knew that Auntie Jan was always there for us, no matter what. She would remember birthdays and gave thoughtful gifts. Helena and Carmen both remember lots of socks and cute and perfect practical things for their little ones, like a good sun hat or tiny purple fur boots for Helena's little daughter, Katie. She went to hockey games, dance recitals, soccer games, graduations. She was Cousin Alyssa's MC at her wedding because Alyssa said that she knew them both so well and was the best for the job. When I graduated from chiropractic school in 2002, she and Dawn made the special trip to Minneapolis to see me get my degree, and that meant the world to me. My brother Trevor, who's lived in South Carolina for over 20 years, sent me a note saying how Auntie Jen always made a big effort to connect when he was in town and would go out of the way to come and see him and his family under any kind of circumstances. He notes that they even made the trip to Charleston for their wedding, and that 2,100 miles and 3 flights is a commitment to family. Even though Auntie Jan seemed like she was a tough, practical nut, she was a softie on the inside. As Helena wrote, Auntie was no nonsense, get things done, the boss, but she had the biggest heart and showed up for all of us, time and time again. Lise told me how as a young adult, when she was going through some emotional and work struggles, Auntie Jan sent her a book that helped her see the bigger picture of things. Lise noted that she always had her back that way, and I agree. She gave me a book she had found on how to be a boss and not be a bitch. We had a good laugh over that one. It was useful. Alyssa commented that Jan was one of the first people to meet her future husband Tyler and to know that she was expecting Juliet. We all knew that she could always be called for solid and caring advice, and that she would drop anything to help you if you needed her. Whether it was a last-minute babysitter for Colin and Robbie, a bride somewhere, a place to live for a while, which I did a couple times, or just a chat about what was going on in our lives. You knew that you could count on her to be Auntie Jan. When Auntie Jan was pregnant with Aaron, I lived in her basement and was going to university. I remembered going to the hospital to visit her, and the words she told me there always stuck with me, and I shared them many times with my new moms in practice. She commented that while she was laying in bed, holding cute little Aaron, she realized she was no longer just herself. She was from then onwards someone's mom. Her identity had changed, and she embraced it. She loved being a mom, and I watched her as she went through the first years and feel fortunate to have been there for that. She still was Auntie Jan though, and even though she was busy with her own blonde babies, she always had time for the rest of her family. Lise remembers the first time that Janice and little baby Aaron, myself, Colin, and my mom came up to visit them at Fort Mac. We made the long drive to go see them, even with little baby Aaron. My cousins Helena and Alyssa remember how Auntie Jan would let them take little Aaron to the park and give them jobs to make them feel like important big cousins. She had a great way of talking to us kids in a matter-of-fact way and not talking down to us, that we were important and had something to contribute. She was busy keeping up to all of us and Aaron, and then cute little Davis came along, and life got even busier for her with 2 kids and a career. Time flew by for all of us. And that takes us to Dawn, Aaron, and Davis. She loved you 3 the most ferociously of all. And I know she was so very proud of her great kids and how they turned into amazing young adults. She was your biggest fan, and we know how fierce a fan your mom was. I just want you to know we love you very much, and we're all here for you. Auntie Jan was a strong woman who would never want to be seen as a victim. Her first episode with cancer, she went in and did what she had to do. I remember her sharing with me that she just couldn't relate to the pink warrior theme. She told me she just wanted to go do what had to be done and then move on. And that was Jan. She made the trip with her sisters to Norway in June 2019 happen, even though she wasn't feeling that great, but was so glad she had gone. Erin shared with me that even through this last year after the brain surgery, she never once complained about things or questioned why her. She wouldn't want anyone feeling sorry for her, and no matter how much it was hard to see her this last while, I made sure to always try to keep things as normal as possible, even if I was crying inside, because I so badly wanted her to get better. Even though she didn't think she was a warrior, she was to the end. We will miss her. Her great laugh, her smile, her sharp intelligence, her practical nature, her storytelling, her joy for life, her addiction to Coronation Street, her sarcastic remarks, her accepting nature, her hard-headed attitude, her visits, her advice, her genuine interest in our lives, her hugs, and her unconditional love for all of us. Who will tell the stories about how Helena would only eat buns and pickles when she was little, or how Peter would show us all his muscles like his favorite wrestlers, how Alyssa would say, "Hum," and all the other little funny stories. I don't know how she remembered all of them. We will have to remember. She would want us to, just as we will always remember her and know that she is forever in our hearts and minds and spirits. I have made a promise to myself to live my life with more joy and thanks in her honor, and I invite you to do the same. I think Auntie Jan would like that. Thank you.
I was glad to hear a few chuckles during that, because that's what we're here for. And I noticed, I was reading some of the messages of condolence, and a lot of them, there's a lot of nice things said, and one of the things that really stood out to me was how people enjoy spending time with Janice and sharing stories. And much like Janine has just done, I'm gonna invite anyone that would like to participate and share a story. A couple of people have already volunteered to step forward, so we'll begin now with the youngest brother, Graham. You'll lead us off, but I do invite others if you feel. We have 2 microphones. This one, we've chosen this one because it has support. But if you feel, and if you want to come up as a group, that other microphone is also available. And if sometimes it's easier to stand with someone in front of a group like this. So Graham, if you'd like to continue, please.
I look around the room here, thinking about this last couple of days. His family of all kinds of nieces, nephews, aunts, a little bit of everything here, and friends and colleagues. My relationship with my sister was, Janice, a little different than the rest. She was my big sister. I don't know if she was ever really aware of this, but I really admired her for my entire life. She's an amazing person, and for the most part, I had to do that from afar because she really wanted to get all that close to me. As a little brother, I don't know much, but a lot of things. Honestly, she was a huge influence in my life. I was probably about 13 or 14 years old when we actually became friends. It's something I'm kind of watching with my own kids here in my house now. We're about that same age where they start to recognize that they're people and good people that can help each other and be friends as well as siblings. So that's kind of fun to watch that happen in my own home right now. The other thing that happened when I was about 13 or 14 that might have balanced the scale, it was all of a sudden I was an inch taller than she was. It certainly helped. Again, whether she intended this to be the way it worked out or not, but she paved the way for me in a lot of ways. When I moved to these new neighborhoods or new school, new friends, being Jan's younger brother, little brother, was a pretty easy way to enter those circumstances. She made it pretty easy for me to step in and be a part of those communities. As I grew older, she demonstrated a confidence in me that I lots of times didn't have in myself. She made me believe in things that I didn't recognize I was capable of doing or interested in doing. She was a huge help in just the way I've lived my life and to be a parent. So much of that I've learned just from watching my older sister just be yourself and be forthright and honest. And I guess maybe the best message I got from her, best lesson I learned from her was the responsibility that comes with being a good friend is to be honest and forthright, especially when that message might be a tough one to deliver to somebody, but being honest and forthright was really important to who she was. And I guess that kind of leads me to where I wrap this up with Jan. Whether she was giving you a hug or a kick in the butt, either way, you knew she was doing it from a place in her heart that meant she cared about you and you were important to her. People that were family and her friends, they were
Now, Dad, if you'd like to come forward, do you want this microphone or the one over there? Okay, Ross, do you want to come up as well?
Yeah, Janice was born, as Ross said, in January 5th, 65. And she joined our family at Stringer. The one thing I want to add to Ross's story about the old man, somehow or other that thing seemed to always run out of gas about 3 blocks from home. It was very, very helpful. As some of them have said, Jan was a very determined child. Right from the very beginning, I knew what she wanted, and a lot of times she knew how to get it. She liked the outdoors, and that presented a problem when it was time to come in. And an instance of that occurred one day when I came home for lunch. Janice was outside sitting in the sleigh crying because no one would give her a ride. Inside, her mother was at her wit's end, wondering how she was going to get her in without a big fight. Well, I finally talked her into coming into the house for lunch. And the other trick she had when you brought her in and go to take her coat off, she would go like this so you couldn't get the coat off. Another of her little quirks, I guess, was that she gave babysitters a real bad time quite often. Carolyn had to intervene and straighten things out. While at high school, she enjoyed playing basketball, as several have said. Stuart said she played basketball the way Ross played hockey. That was straight ahead, either through or over whoever was in the way. At one time, both Elaine and Janice worked at the Volco, and that gave them some experience in dealing with people. Later on, she had enough of low-paid jobs, and she decided to go back to school. She went to Moose Jaw for 2 years, taking accounting. In the summer, she had a job with the Saskatchewan government. And of all places, she ended up in the taxation area. And one of her jobs was to call hotels, restaurants, and etc. about their liquor license. One time, the owner of the business said he needed more time to get money enough to pay it. And Jan said, well, you can have all the time you want, but somebody will be able to pick up your license tomorrow. The license responded very quickly. After graduating from Moose Jaw, Jan picked up a job with a loan company in Calgary. She quite often phoned me in the evening just to sound off low and get settled back down. Once it was about a person who got a loan to buy a television and then was unable to make the payments. And the TV was gone. Jan said the only thing that you could find in the house of any value was kids. You couldn't take them. All the time she kept up job possibilities and finally found one that was really looked good. And she applied for it, and it was Revenue Canada. She put in an application and was accepted. And I'm not sure how long Janice worked there, but I think it was somewhere around 30 years. I'm sure that everyone who dealt with Janice realized that she was a no-nonsense person. We are very proud of her accomplishments. Now turn to the greatest problem of her life. That was in 2017, when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She had an operation in late 2017, followed by radiation and chemotherapy. She needed to be free of cancer. By 2019, she had recovered enough to go on a planned trip with her sisters Elaine and Carolyn and to Norway, and she really enjoyed the trip. And they were all able to see where their grandmother came from. Following their return from the following their return. We had a family reunion in Shell Lake in July. In September, she went with Carolyn Gordon and Ross out to the Rosemount Cemetery to clean up the Affleck section. During all this time, she felt quite good. However, she realized she had developed some hearing loss and balance issues. When this was checked out, a tumor was discovered close to her inner ear, and an operation was required. Well, that operation got set back at different times for different reasons, and finally was done 8 months later. In June of 2020, they were unable to remove all of the tumor, which was at that time classed as being benign. However, this was later changed to terminal malignancy. This was followed a year of long struggle for Janice. We were able to visit her on 3 different occasions, but Janice, as was mentioned, passed away May 27, 2021. We will always remember her. Thank you.
Earlier, Elaine mentioned that Janice had a motto, which was, be brave. And I always thought her motto was, if you don't want a sarcastic answer, don't ask a stupid question. All right, I'm going to ask again, the floor is open, is someone would like to, as I said, you can come up, use this microphone or that one. We do have, Ross has something that was prepared by someone that he'd like to read. So we'll maybe do that first, and as I said, the microphone is still open.
This is a note from Pearl, Janice's friend who's in attendance here today. And Pearl worked with Janice. Janice started out with the feds in GST in 1991. Several years later, GST was amalgamated with Revenue Canada, where I was working, beginning a long and happy friendship. My first recollection of Janice, 20 plus years ago, when she was pregnant with Davis. Ordinarily, that wouldn't be so memorable, except she was so big. I mean, she was huge. Even years later, we would joke about that. Janice came over to tax as a collector and then moved positions to CPP/EI rulings, where her job was to determine whether a worker is an employee or is self-employed, and whether the worker's employment was pensionable, insurable, or both. In that time, Janice became a team leader and switched over to administer the fairness legislation. This legislation allowed, under certain circumstances, for penalties and interest or override accounts to be waived, or overdue accounts to be waived. The rest of her career was pretty much dedicated to the success of this single program, and she joined HQ in Ottawa to take on this task. I know she flew back and forth several times to Ottawa. Janice was well respected by her peers, supervisors, and most of all, her team members. I saw a little saying that I thought summed up Janice's work ethic perfectly. It went, lazy people do a little work and think they should be winning. Winners work as hard as possible and still worry if they are being lazy. Janice was that winner. In 2012, Janice's hard work was validated when she became an honored recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, the Canadian medal which was to honor significant contributions and achievements by Canadians. It was awarded to citizens who made significant contribution to their fellow countrymen, their community, or to Canada. what a wonderful moment in her career that was. As everyone knows, Janice officially retired in September last year. Most recently, Janice was acknowledged as a 30-year employee at the Long Service Awards at CRA. Janice's medal is up front here if you'd like to have a look at it, and there's a description that talks about what the medal was all about. And you know, in typical Janice fashion, she got the award, she told us about it, but it wasn't no big fancy thing. She just did it. So thank you, Pearl. That was wonderful insight into Janice's work life. She inherited the work ethic gene and the leadership one too. Oh, and she was well liked and respected too. Yes. The online tributes underscored that too. At this time, I'm going to just shoot from the hip here and tell you a little story about myself too. I don't think I ever told anybody other than Stuart about this. But I had a lasting memory of Janice. In February of '95, I had a health scare. I was at University Hospital for a whole bunch of tests. And when half my tests were over, I went over to Dawn and Janice's, because it was just across the river. And I was afraid. And my little sister looked after me that day. I will remember that forever. My last conversation with Janice was a few weeks ago when I had decided to retire, and we had a chat about that, and I said, I had to wait till you were done, Janice, because I said I would work longer than you. So we did. But we had a really good conversation, and she was really encouraging to me towards my retirement. So we had a really good conversation. Her speech that day was full of energy and encouragement, as you've heard. That's how she encouraged all her nieces and nephews and her family. She encouraged me too. Thank you.
So as we were mentioning, there were a lot of nice things said in Janice's condolence messages, and some of those words included talk about her dry wit, her dedication, that she was a friend, and my favorite, she had a strong and feisty spirit. Patty, there, are you good? You're welcome to use either.
Good to see everybody here to honor Janice. I'm Dawn's big sister, Patty, and I didn't have a sister. I have two wonderful brothers, but Janice was my sister for 30 years, and we had a tremendous amount of fun together. We laughed, we cried, we ate, we drank, we shopped, and we traveled together as families. Dawn and Janice were always there for our three children in all of their sporting endeavors, acting, anything else that they were involved in, and Davis and Aaron always were along for the ride. And then as Davis and Aaron bloomed into their sports and dancing and football, we were there to support as well, and wouldn't have missed a moment of it. Janice was feisty. Janice spoke her mind. Janice and I had many very deep conversations, and we understood each other. She was a doer, and she was always available to make it to any type of family function. She was a planner. I'm a planner. They would load the kids up for Christmases at the lake with barely an inch of space to move, but they did it, and I think they did it because Janice always boasted that she never had cooked a turkey, that the turkey was always up to everybody else on either side of the family. And I think she held pretty true to that until maybe a couple of years ago. I'd be fooled. So yes, we spent many Christmases, New Year's together, we went to concerts together. We lived life and loved life. And although we haven't and did not have the opportunity to spend with her since last March, when we all went out for a beautiful family dinner here in Saskatoon, we spoke, we communicated mostly through Dawn, and I've grieved that loss of time, and I know we'll all carry on and hopefully find joy in our lives ahead, because that's what Janice would want. And yeah, loved her, and we'll miss her dearly, and we'll be here for the family anytime.
For those who don't know me, to those who do and are still trying to forget that they've met me, I am very lucky to be Dawn's brother-in-law. I'm extremely fortunate to be an uncle to Aaron and Davis. There's been a recurring theme with everybody's kind words so far today. And I'm going to keep that going and share a few stories that Janice and I had, and they're funny. I'll get myself together here. She was tough. I love the fact that she was tough. The other day I was thinking, if I ever had to go down a dark alley, dark, scary alley, who would I want with me? And I have Janice. Not that she couldn't beat people up, that might be there, but she just had to give them that look. And stubborn, can I say stubborn? We were having some New Year's wine in the backyard at 10:10, and we were going back in, and Janice fell head first into a snowbank, and I tried to help her out, and she basically told me that, you know what, I'll get out of here on my own. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And it was the same night. Everybody else kind of wimped out, and there was me and Janice. She says, you can't go to bed until we've drank the rest of the wine on the table. And we were up for a long time. But during that night, we did have a really good conversation about her love for her husband and her kids, and for our family. Easygoing. You know, when we find out that the Turnmeyers were coming down, we're so happy. So happy we're going to see Janice. So happy we're going to see the kids. There's a couple of times we were even happy we were going to see Dawn. But our thing was, I wake up early Saturday morning, I turn on these goofy black and white westerns, and Janice was usually down 15 minutes later, and she'd watch with me. But I know darn well she was thinking, as soon as this guy goes get more coffee, I'm turning into Coronation Street. Her laugh, she had a great laugh. And I remember sharing a story, and I'm going to throw you under the bus here. Our son Andy, I was telling her the story about, well, you wouldn't guess what Andy did today. He ran over his lips with his skateboard at daycare. And I thought she was going to pee herself. And then there was that laugh and that other little evil laugh she had, where if somebody was being a jerk, and she was thinking, yeah, you'll get yours, you'll get what's coming to you. And when it did, it was like, that little evil laugh. And so caring, we'd be at a lot of functions like this, weddings, reunions, and, you know, I look around, where the heck did Janice go? And she's sitting at a table of 20 people she doesn't know from Adam. And one time I noticed this, and later on I said, who are those people? How do you know them? I didn't, but I know now. She took the time to get to know everybody. She was special that way. And I want to kind of challenge everybody to maybe be that same way too. So easy to sit back and just let everybody else maybe do the chit chatting. Just go out and introduce yourself and get to know everybody. I'll wrap it up. There's so many layers to Janice, and the last one is that she had so much love in her heart, and you know, all those layers to Janice. I'm gonna miss everyone. Never forget her. Thank you.
Just a few things to share, Janice. Janice and I are cousins, but also very close friends. As a young kid, I couldn't wait for their family to come together. In our teenage years, we played around at grandma's in town, out at the farm. We played in the bales, riding horses, swimming, in the lake tubing, skiing, ripping around on dirt bikes, skidooing, chasing boys and drinking beer. As I said, yes, I'm my bad cousin. And that is as much as I'll tell you on that stuff. We had so much fun. Janice was always a part of it too. As young adults, we worked in Saskatoon, as he mentioned, together for a bit. Sports was big for both of us, and basketball was a passion for us. Janice was a fierce competitor, beautiful soul, and a great athlete. Life took us in different directions through marriage and kids, but we always stayed in touch. Janice was a strong, independent woman, full of spice and vinegar. She liked things in order, organized, planned. She grew up. Me, always a bit on the flywood senior pants. She loved her family. And if you were one of her friends, you were very lucky because she never gave up on you. She loved you always. This will be very hard for me. Her and I had plans for our later years. Lots of time on the lake. And a little mischief like the old days. I loved her. I would miss her dearly.
It's too bad we don't have a picture of it, but I'll see if I can do the Janice look. That was her superpower. She could stop you in your tracks. Don would know instantly.
It stopped in my track many times.
Okay, well, we're coming to a close. Just a few things, and then acknowledgements, but I want to point out that Janice's sisters, Carolyn and Elaine, have prepared some potted ivies, and they're at the back, the sanctuary area, I guess we call that. And there's a significance to the ivy. And yes, so it's intended that at least one per family. And I think we have plenty. So ivy is incredibly strong and durable. It can withstand hardship. Its survival and determination are an example of the human spirit and the strength we have to carry on. Ivy grows in a spiral, like a hug. Its interweaving growth forms long-lasting connections and bonds, a sign of tenacity, peace, love, and a symbol of the friendships we form. Ivy attaches itself and does not easily let go, a symbol of fidelity. Ivy is an evergreen, a symbol of vibrancy and of eternal life. The 5 points of the leaves are also a symbol of protection. And Janice had all of these traits. So please take the ivy with you today as a reminder of a life well lived.
One last story about Ross. So you guys are talking about the Janice look. So growing up, my Elaine that was here, she used to give me that look and say, "You got the same look as Annie Janice." And then it took me about 20 years, probably when I was about 30, to figure out she didn't get it from Annie Janice. She got it from me, because Annie Janice and I are quite alike. So I'd like to make some acknowledgements here. So donations in memory of Janice can be left with Todd of Hanson's Funeral Service to deliver to your chosen charity. I believe there's envelopes in the foyer if you choose to. The United Church has provided individual beverages outside of the church for those who wish to remain after the service. I believe it's up front. Up front, Carol? Yeah. Please observe the health guidelines if you stay for a meet and greet outdoors. We're allowed to do that. Private interment will follow later with family only. And one other acknowledgement or announcement is the Run for the Cure is October 3rd. Elaine put us on the website as Team Janice Affleck. We will be doing walks in Saskatoon, Regina, Calgary, and Edmonton. So the site is up there. So if you want to participate, come join us in one of those places for sure, because we're going to have a lot of people out. But if you can't participate and you want to donate, you can do it on that Run for the Cure website. The last thing I'm going to close with is Carolyn sent me a text here about a week ago, and it says, grief. Grief, I've learned, is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, in the lump of your throat, and in the hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go.